Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. This is a really fun show. I got contacted recently by a guy that I flew with very briefly one of the days of the Rockies Traverse with Will Gadd. And he said, you got to talk to Max, man. He's done the X-Alps 4 times, and he's a legend around here up in Canada, and he taught the Muellers how to fly. And so I reached out to Max, and we just had a really fun conversation. We talk about safety, risk, margin, the X-Alps, of course, because we're both junkies. A lot of really good stuff here. Max has been instructing since the late 80s. He's been in the game a very long time. I think you're going to get a lot out of this and really enjoy this conversation. I've also still got this giveaway going for these great little GoPro knee pad mounts that we got gifted to us from Ben French down in New Zealand. So if you want to share the show or tell your friends or give us a rating or put it up on the social media, just let me know how you've done that. And you could be in to win one of these great mounts. I'll be deciding that at the end of August. And that's about it. Enjoy this great talk with Max Fanderl. Max, so awesome to have you on the show, man. I was watching your X-Alps exploits from years back, and a good friend of yours reached out to me just yesterday, actually, and said, hey, you got to get Max on the show.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on that show there. It's a pleasure to talk to you there, and congratulations to your 2 times X-Alps, to the 2 times adventures you had in there, and also congratulations to the other adventures you have done, especially the one in Alaska there. It's very impressive.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's really cool. It's awesome.
Just before we started recording there, you were telling how you got into this crazy game back in the late 80s. I'd love to, could you rehash that story?
Yeah, I have been doing this for quite a while now. I think I started in 86, 87. That's when I got into it.
Yeah.
And the reason how I got into it was very simple. I mean, I was already quite intrigued with the gliding and the flying before that. As a kid, I already admired the skydiving and, all these type of sports. And then I remember I was maybe just 14, 15. An uncle of mine actually started hang gliding, and I had my hands first time on a hang glider and was just like around on the practice field with it. And that was it for me, right? But it didn't go far because it was at the very beginning of the hang gliding times, and a lot of incidents were happening back then. And so my parents didn't let me go further. And it took a little while then after. And so that's, as I said, in 86, 87, it was actually one day I hiked up a fairly good mountain. And when I was sitting on top, another guy was sitting up there with a big grin in his face. And we talked about the party down in town. There's a town party happening later tonight. And then I said, oh, yeah, I'm going to rush down there to make it to the party. And he said, oh, yeah, see you there in 10. I will be down there in 10. And literally what he did is he just took one of this first old, they called them a monofly. And it was a skydive chute, 9 cells, just with siliconized material. Pulled that thing off, run off that steep kind of field into a cliff. And it didn't take him 10, it took him 5 minutes he was down there. And my jaw just dropped, and I go like, oh my God, this is it. This is really it. If I don't take this on now I don't know how old I was, maybe 20 or so. I will never do it. So I run down like crazy. A couple hours later, I see him down there in the party already half wasted and having a good time, right? And I just pulled him aside and said, you gotta show me this. I gotta be in it, right? Yeah. And sure enough, the next day we went up into a ski hill. And my first flight actually was very interesting. He just said, all you got to do is just run as fast as you can. And then if you want to go right, you pull right, and left, go left, and it will land on its own.
I love it. Back in the day.
Back in the day. Yeah, well, there was really no school there, right? And nothing really happened.
That's all they knew how to, that was the extent of his knowledge.
Exactly. And I mean, the only guys who were out there and teaching were virtually hang glider schools. And some of the hang glider instructors, they turned into a paragliding instructor by kind of default, right? So there was not much knowledge there either.
Sure.
And so sure enough, I mean, I went there, did my first run off that ski hill between the trees. And I remember, just like it would be yesterday, the tree came closer, and I pulled down the one brake line, and then I'd pull down the other brake line, and I was just escalating in a big swing, right? And eventually I made it out there, flew down straight. And then the funny thing was this, and that's how I learned my first lesson really about glide ratio. Because I was looking down there, I saw that barbed wire fence, and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to land before that barbed wire fence. Oh, no, I'm going to land after that barbed wire fence. Oh, no, bang, boom, ding, I was right in it, right?
Oh, man.
So, landed in the barbed wire fence, cut up my hands, and that was my first experience.
Oh, it's cool. Hard knocks.
Then took right away the wing, packed it up, and run right back up again, and did it again right away, right? So that's how hooked I was there. And it didn't take long. I think it was about 5-6 months later, I quit my daytime job, just quit it because I got connected with another school and started teaching from that point. Yeah, I taught a lot of people back then, right there at Tegelberg in the Allgäu. And then I also did a lot of test flying for a lot of different manufacturers and parts of it for the associations to rate the equipment. And and then actually in the 90s, 91, this is when I came to Canada for a holiday. And I liked it so much out here that I got stuck here, and I'm here since then. And
So you came out for a trip and you stayed.
I came out for a trip here, and this is where I met the Muellers. And then after this, I came here to the valley itself, where I'm still living here in Invermere. But we were flying back then more in Golden. And yeah, I liked it so much that one thing one thing went to another, and I'm still here.
Wow.
And it took me almost 10 years to go back to the Alps the first time.
Really?
That's how much I liked it here. Oh yeah. No, I was here flying around all over the place, and did a lot of what I really liked here is, let's put it this way, is it's so laid back, and it's so really what you see, what you fantasize as a European. In Europe, you always see like the wild, the backcountry, nobody there. I mean, you understand it way more. Like the Alaska trip, what you have done is literally untouched, right? Mm. And here it's very civilized here in the valley. But as soon as you go a step behind the valley, you are in no man's land, right?
Yeah.
For a long time, and just exploring this kind of places, and just also flying into these places, like doing out returns into the back ranges and coming back out again. It's a different ball game, and it's just is a different flair to it, which I really like. It's amazing, right?
That
Versus
range
in Europe,
is so spectacular, and the only time I ever flew it was coming south with Will Gadd, on our Rockies Traverse trip, and we had the most spectacular flight from Swansea, right? That's the launch above Invermere, and just those mountains, in Golden, that whole segment down to the border is just wild.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. And then we even go into the mountains into the west side, so across the valley in there as well, right? So the whole area is just it's stunning and beautiful. And to some extent, when you go back then to Europe and fly in Europe, for me it was kind of hard to wrap my head around that you can fly behind another mountain range and there will be civilization.
yeah. There's no such thing really as remote in terms of what we think of it as. There's no such thing as flying through a coal and being in the middle of nowhere. Like, there's another bus stop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, another bus stop. You go here or go there, or even from the X-Alps perspective, it took me a little bit at the beginning to wrap my head around. You can land literally anywhere, wherever you want to land, even high alpine, right? Mm-hmm. And everywhere is trails. You see a trail, and it's even marked and even has numbers on it, and it even will tell you where it goes. Like here, you find somewhere a goat trail or whatever, nothing, and you follow a creek and bushwhack through with the mosquitoes and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And then and the funny thing is, and the nice thing in the Alps is, you can be at 3,000 meters or higher, and you just literally the maximum is a 3-4 hour hike. You will end up somewhere on a hut, and they will be open, and there will be a nice blonde with a push-up bra in there serving you apfelstrudel and schnapps, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I
we
mean,
were we
it's
were getting so
unbelievable.
fancy this time that I was actually flying with Gaia Maps on my phone. So if these were kind of flights where we knew they were just going to be a quick flight between a cell or something, and I would pull up, instead of using your typical flight instruments, I was using Gaia, and so I could land literally right on the trail that I knew was going to take me to the next launch. It's just
Yeah, no, it's
ridiculous.
absolutely phenomenal. You can go anywhere, and even if you end up somewhere in the mountains, you will find somewhere a shelter where you virtually can sleep in, right?
Yeah.
And most of them you get food. All you need to have is euros in your pocket. That's all the gear you really need
Right.
to pay for the food and the accommodation. Versus here, if you end up in the backcountry here, oh man, this is a day's walk out, or 2 days sometimes, right?
Yeah, it's a
And then
totally
you
different
in
game.
bear country, and there's the bears, cougars out there, and more so the mosquitoes to stay overnight there, right? Um, that's the
They're
bigger
very
part.
persistent.
Yes, yeah, they don't give up, these guys, right? But I always say, the good thing is they come with the price. You don't have to pay extra for them, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Well, that's a very good attitude. Uh, so 86, 87, 88, was your first craft a paraglider or a hang glider? Because I noted you also did quite a bit of hang gliding. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, my real craft flying first properly was a paraglider.
Okay.
And then in the late 80s, I also started hang gliding. And that was a pretty cool thing. Like Tegelberg, I literally had my hang glider stored on top. And then based on the conditions, I just switched between hang gliding and paragliding.
And then so Canada grabs your eye and you're bewitched, as many people are. That's a perfect part of the world to fly. How did it all start happening with teaching? Like, take me through maybe like the Muellers, the legends.
So I started up coming to Calgary and got connected with the Muellers, and especially with Willie back then. And yeah, there's a funny story to it. I mean, back then it was all about hang gliding, and hang gliding, it has an advantage on any flying site, which is a windy flying site. And by Cochrane, Calgary, it's a ridge, a grass ridge, and it's kind of windy as well. And so they just looked back then at paragliding like, oh yeah, well, it's kind of a popular sport out there, but well, we maybe have to jump on the bandwagon with it or not, and we'll see, right? And I remember the first couple of days, so he watched me fly and going back and forth, and he was kind of impressed with the ground handling and what I had in this case. But then one day he came up, I mean, it was in the first couple of days. He said, well, Max, see, this is the weather where we still fly our hang gliders, and it will be fun, and you can do anything. And I just looked at it and go like, yeah, it's a bit stiff, that's true, but I know we can do it, right? Then he said, if you really, I don't know what kind of bet he did. He wanted to bet on it. And I said, sure, no problem. And so I had to literally go back and took my wing and unpacked it, hooked everything in. And I had to scrunch it all up in a nice little tulip and had to walk to the ridge all scrunched up because that's how windy it was. I can remember it was at least 30, 40K winds. And I stood a little bit into the hill. And all I did is I just opened the center cell and threw the wing into the air, and it made a big bang and boof, and I was flying. And then after I landed, after half an hour later, he said, oh, okay, so now you got my interest. And
that's great.
so
Wow, that scared the hell out of me. No, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, that's what he got like. Wow, so now I'm more interested in it. And then so I started actually. He got me more involved, and my English wasn't really that good back then at all. And then he said, "Oh, you should come and you start, your instructor, senior instructor in Germany, and blah blah blah. You should start giving us lessons." And so he started me with hooking up a course for his paraglider people who came there and wanted to learn more. And then at the same time, his son Chris was hanging around with me all the time. And I think back then he was only 14 years old or so. And I mean, that kid, he was just a talent, right? So he watched, and then he always tried to read the Hang Glider magazine, the German ones. And he always tried that I translated it for him because he loved the pictures and everything like that. And then it didn't take a year or whatever. After this, Chris got on this paraglider, and in no time, I mean, I think did you know Chris Mueller on the end?
I didn't know. They were before my time.
Yeah. And I mean, he was such a humble guy, but such an amazing, beautiful to watch pilot, and ground handling, anything it was just superior, right? The sad part is both of them, they're not alive anymore, right? But I mean,
briefly,
they left a big
just for those in the audience who don't know, give a real brief on what happened with both the Muellers.
What both happened to them is Willie actually got more into the paragliding on the end of the day, and he flew on the end wings which were pretty high end, and he really liked it because they were getting closer and closer, what he called to hang gliding. And in Chelan, he was on a competition, and at takeoff had a major collapse and spiraled into a rock and literally died. So that was the end of it. He died actually paragliding, not hang gliding. With Chris, he was in one of the competitions in Florida with a hang glider, and he died there by landing. You know, they used to do this money kind of grab landing. I don't know if you know.
Yep.
So when they're coming fast and hot with the ground effect and fly from one street pillow to another and grab the money bags. And he came in and, it was a little bit too low on one end, and came in with the down tube and too fast, and that was the end of it there, right? It was pretty sad.
Max, with part of what I love talking about on the show is safety and risk and that kind of thing. You've been in the game a long time. We're kind of switching major gears here quickly, but just because of talking about Chris and Willie, how has your own approach to risk and safety changed over the years? Because the 4 times you competed in the X-Alps, the X-Alps can be pretty dicey. Yeah,
it's a very interesting point that, I have to say, luckily what happened to me in the very beginning of my career, when we started doing the tests, we were too lazy to drive 2 hours to a lake and do all the testing over water. We did it actually right at Tegelberg, right there on the high mountain. And just 20 minutes or 10 minutes away from our house. And so I used to, just like any other young buck on the end, get too cocky on the end and put more things into the program than you should do. So, normally you have a safety buffer of, let's say, 400 or 500 feet, and then it goes down to 300, 200, 150 feet. And one time it just didn't work out as well as I wanted, and I nailed the ground really hard. I mean, hard. So hard that my whole body was so bruised up that actually I stiffened up 2 days later, and I couldn't even move. It was like paralyzed, right? And that really scared the hell out of me. And it took me about a year, I would say, at least, to get mentally over it, how much in pain I was, and I got really shaken up by this. So from that moment on, I built always a buffer zone around myself, a safety zone, and I said, okay, this is what for me is full tilt. I can go, that's the fastest, the most risk part I can go for. So let's take about 20% off or 2 notches off from this, and that's how far I go. I don't go to full tilt. I only go 2/3 or give it 20% buffer zone into it. If something goes wrong, I have that buffer zone, right? And that's what I have done since day one, since that day. And that really, I would say, kept me alive. The only issue what lots of people see, like, oh yeah, well, that's not true. If I see you flying, it's already way beyond my full tilt, right?
Yeah, it has to be person specific.
Yes, and that comes with experience to some extent. I have been flying a lot also in areas at the beginning, like in the Death Valley in Owens Valley, and here in the foothills too, where we recorded over 20 meters per second climbing rates, right?
Jesus.
And we flew those ones and we had fun with it, right? So I could handle these things. I could fly with it, and I could go in and out. And the training, what I'm doing a lot, or especially for the X-Alps, is we do have very strong thermals here in the Columbia Valley, as you know. But what I did is, when it was really strong, I always flew. My training is flying against the wind, into the wind. And what makes it so tricky and so hard is you have to approach the thermals. If you approach them right from behind in the lee side of the thermal, right, we're talking 10, 15 meter per second thermals, you would get washed down right to the ground.
Hmm.
So you really have to feel that to fly around and poke into the thermal from the side. And that's how I go north as far as I can until I'm exhausted, more or less. And then I go south and just, go with the wind, and that's just a piece of cake, right?
What was the impetus to learn how to do that? Because I think typically people just, there's some wind, I'm going to go with the wind, fly downwind. Obviously in the X-Alps, we fight against the wind the whole way. So were you already kind of planning, maybe I'll do the X-Alps someday, or was this just something you figured out would be smart to learn?
I just figured out it's smart to learn, and it's actually more challenging. And it was, instead of just buzzing around there and sitting in the air and just go, and then for me, it was like finding a retrieval always, or a hitchhike back. It was almost a bit too much for me. So flying from here, I always wanted to go as far ahead into the wind and come home with the wind and be at home, because we have so many other activities here, like with the lake right here and the whole area. It's such an active area. That I didn't want to miss out on many on the other things. So that's why I always planned go first north and then come back with the wind, land right beside the beer fridge, and life is good, right?
Max, I'm going to take you back to the accident you had when you pounded really hard. One of the questions we get a lot over and over and over again, because it's flying and people do make mistakes, and they hopefully they have what you had, and they don't get killed or something, but they have a bad accident, and they're more shaken up sometimes mentally than physically. And they find it quite hard to come back. You said it took you about a year. Have you had other accidents? And then if you have, how have you come back mentally?
So the number one part is it really, yes, that incident I had was for me a huge wake up call, and knock on wood, I did not have any other accidents since, right? I had maybe some closer calls, but nothing I got really heard of. And you are absolutely right. Paragliding itself, and I see this in paragliding and in ultralight flying. I do quite a bit of ultralight flying myself, and also teach it. What we see is people who don't have the proper education want to get into the flying too fast. And our problem is flying a paraglider is super simple. I mean, all you really do is just sit in there. If the wing gets pushed to the left, you pendle underneath and keep on flying straight. So that's the easiest aircraft ever, right? Mm-hmm. But then people all of a sudden realize, well, the wing is pretty easy to fly, but to read the conditions, we will be at the borderline of safety, like in a split second when the winds just get too strong and too early, right? Mm-hmm. Versus flying a glider plane, if there is a crosswind of or gusty winds to 60, 70K, that's not even bothering us, right? I mean, by the way, I fly glider planes as well.
Jeez, fly everything.
Fly pretty much. The only thing I don't really fly is rotary and brooms. That's the only thing I don't.
You got to take up brooms.
Yeah, brooms. I mean, if Harry Potter comes by, I tell you, I will take one right away because they're so easy to park, right? I mean, you don't have to pack them, put them in a corner. I mean, that. Right? Seriously. So anyhow, but you see, with paragliding, you get exposed into this, let's call it the red zone, very fast. And then people get scared. And the scare, I would say most dropouts we have is because people get surprised and scared and will not get back into the saddle again, right? And this is something, it's really, and that's what I do with my lessons all the time. I say, the faster you get into it, the bigger chances is that you actually not getting hurt, that you will get scared. And then the scare will be the part why you will quit.
So this is this fine line that I find really tricky. So what you just said comes up again and again and again. The pilots who tend to, let's call it make a name for themselves, or they get really good at World Cups, or they can compete in the X-Alps, that kind of thing. They all say the same thing. Like, well, what would you have done differently if you rewound the clock? They all say, well, I would go slower. I'd be more patient. I'd be more safe. I'd have a bigger margin. I was too aggressive. But how do you get good and do that? You know what I mean? You see what I'm saying? Like to really improve, I think what all these pilots are saying is that they got good fast because they took risk and they were aggressive, and yet they either got lucky or, they skimped through that kind of intermediate syndrome, maybe with like a one accident like you had, where they were able to walk away. But, but how do you really improve and also maintain that margin?
Well, the number one thing I think is what needs to be taught right from the beginning, and that's what my lessons always come up is. I'm not showing you how to, I show you how to fly, but what you really learn here is to know when not to go. That's my big saying, to know when not to go. Because if you know when not to go, then you really know when to go, and you will be an amazing XC pilot. Because if you know when not to go, you know the areas where to go, right? And all this will come with experience. And I say to every student, you can do a fast course in 10 days, right? To get them through here, they have minimum 25 flights, which is in my eyes way too little, right?
Yeah.
I think everybody should go at least through one season to see the different conditions of the season, going through different wind directions, Chinook or no Chinook winds. And once you have more experience under your belt, you get more respect. And that's the key thing is you don't want to create fear. You want to have a really good, healthy respect of what you're doing. And if you have respect to the nature, the way that you say, I don't fight you. That's number one thing is if you fight, you will lose anyways, because eventually then Mother Nature is stronger than you. It will show. And the fighting itself, and that's what I like so much about paragliding is it's not about fighting. It's not about how big your balls are. Eventually, at the beginning it is, but eventually or on the end it isn't. Because if you learn how the wing works, how the wing reacts, and you become one with the wing, then the next step is you got to become one with the environment. And when you know how the weather and everything works and have that healthy respect for each other, then you get way more rewarded than just pushing on the end. And that's what I try to bring across.
There's one of the guys I talked to, and probably from your X-Alps campaigns, Tom Dorladeau was on the show, and his saying for that was, if there's doubt, there is no doubt. And I loved that. It's very helpful. When you're standing on launch, you have to be able to assess your own skills. And I think when you're learning, when you're coming up through those stages, you don't really know what you don't know. And so if there's doubt, there is no doubt, and there's never anything wrong with walking down.
100%. And, and that's the bottom line. It really is. And it's the nice part about paragliding too, is you have to stay focused in what you are doing. When you're on launch site, you don't worry about landing. You look at overall you have your flight plan in place and you have the weather in place, but you focus on the takeoff. And then after takeoff, you focus to the next. So you always got to be present. And exactly as Tom says, I say it a little bit different. I say it, you can't be a little bit pregnant. Either you are pregnant or you're not.
I like it.
So there's no gray zone in between. Little bit pregnancy is only guys have it when they have a big belly, I call it, right? But other than that, and that's how flying should be. If you actually inflate a wing, I don't try to inflate a wing. I do inflate a wing, period, right? And then when the wing is all good, then I make my decision if I take off or not. But I don't try or I want to go. So the doubt kind of thing, or maybe in between, this wishy-washy stuff, that has to be cut out, right? And 100% that will make a big impact on anyone's flying career.
I noticed on your website, Max, you do guided tours and you do SIV. Tell me about SIV, because that has changed radically since you started in the sport in the late 80s, when that didn't even exist. So what are your recommendations for your students that are maybe they're beyond that 25? They've got their beginner's license and you're trying to get them safely into that kind of 50, 100-hour zone.
Yeah. So for me, SIV is something which I right away say from the beginning is, because most people think SIV means acro flying, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, SIV is not acro. Acro is acro, and SIV is virtually really learn how to react and what's going on if there is big collapses happening to some extent, right? Mm-hmm. So my SIV courses, they go up to a full stall, because you normally don't even need to fly a full stall, because a full stall is just a reset button if something goes wrong with your acro, right? And And so that's how I believe in the SIV is more doing more, getting more feel for the wing and explore the how far you actually can push a wing, right? Mm-hmm. One of the I work a lot and very close. Actually, I'm gonna go there in a month with Jürgen Kraus in Annecy, and he's doing the SIVs all year long. That's all he does in Annecy, and they have a really cool program, and I really like what they're doing. Is like we do a lot of flying just with rolling, getting the rolls without the brake lines, and then with brake lines, and then doing the collapses and the front stalls and all these type of things to a point where you go, okay, if it's really rough air out there, I know how to stabilize my wing. And more so, the goal for me is this: a really good pilot on the end. You know, even in rough conditions, you shouldn't see collapses, because before a wing collapses, you can already act before and keep the wing open, so, you know, to stabilize everything. That's what I see more in my SIVs, what I want to bring across instead of just doing the acro. Again, acro is a flying on a style on its own. And I'm not an acro pilot. I mean, it's pretty cool to do so, but I have to say, if I would have to do a loop, my pants would be full. No, sorry, I'm not into this anymore. I don't know, it's maybe age, but and I understand the acro pilots, they call cross country pilots or cross country flying more like pirouetting in the air, which I understand too. But that's the beauty about paragliding, I have to say, is, you know, paragliding can be acro flying, it can be cross country flying, and it can also just be a nice, beautiful hike up and do a nice glide down and finish the day or begin the day like that, you know? So I always say you don't have to be a X-Alps pilot or a super acro pilot in order to be recognized as a pilot. Sure. Just to be in the air and enjoy that. I say that what really comes down to is to measure how big the grin is in your face afterwards.
I like that. Max, when you're in your teaching, are there common mistakes? Are there things that make you cringe that a lot of people do? Are there things you're kind of coming back to again and again in terms of what people really need to work on? And maybe give me an answer for that for students at various levels, maybe the very beginning student and maybe the 50-hour student and maybe the 150-hour student.
Well, one of the things I see overall is it wasn't so much in Europe, but here it is more, people want to get into the sport very fast and cheap. And so a lot of schools, they want to offer this and go like, okay, I get you in fast. I give you a 3-4 day, just come 3, 4, 5 days with me. And they just about sign them off and then sell the gear and go from there and done, right? That's what I see overall. People, they come going after the flying itself, like flying off a practice hill 5 times and then being signed off and flying the mountains. It doesn't really do it. No. Again, my slogan is to know when not to go, right? And to be a safe pilot and a good pilot, like in my instructions, man, if you want to get through the beginner stage, it is at least 18, 20 hours in classroom sessions. You know, micrometeorology as an example, to understand what the weather is doing and how things work from the aerodynamics perspective, the safety aspects. It's all classroom time, right? So a lot of classroom time, the more knowledge you have, the better you will be out there and will not run into the surprises, right? That's one part. And the second part is what I see, that people simply just want to get their licenses or their ratings too fast. Or after 5 flights, 10 flights, hey, I know what I'm doing. I want to get signed off and I want to go on my own, right? And what I really think is, what I encourage you a lot is, number one is do as many as possible supervised flights. Number one, you have to really do them. Even if you get in some schools, they say, oh, we sign you off, you're good enough. And then the other thing is this, what I try to create always is within the community, fly within the community itself. So, phone each other up with people who fly a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and fly together and evaluate the weather and the conditions together and go from there, right? So stick together more like that. That's how I see you can create longer lasting pilots.
Mm. What about just techniques in general? Do you have any advice that you give your students about as they're progressing and they're starting to fly Swansea in the middle of the day and trying to figure out kind of piecing together their first cross country flights? What are you working on with them then?
Yeah, what I do is with them at the beginning, and what I believe a lot in it is, number one is ground handling is one of the most important things. And even when they want to get more into the cross-country flying, I say, the more you ground handle, the more you understand and feel your wing and can stabilize your wing in the air, especially then in rougher conditions, right? I mean, we used to know when we used to work as a test pilot, we just inflated the wing on the ground. And I would say to 90%, we can tell already if that wing will even fly, right? And we almost can write a test program already on the ground with ground handling. That's how much you can learn, just with ground handling alone, right? Then the next thing really is what we do is when they take off, what I'd like to do a lot is clip the brake lines back onto the risers and literally just, lean out of your harness to the front, all the way out, and just do this big swimming movements, so that you really offset yourself from the harness and lean all the way out and get the feel how the wing flies when you're all the way out there. And then just do the opposite. Throw your feet right up into the lines, go upside down, right? And fly like that. And then the next thing is what we do is we do the rolling movements just with weight shift. And if you do it right, you just about can actually do wing overs with only weight shifting, not even touching the brake lines. But that gives you a lot of feel and feedback, what the wing is doing, how the wing flies. And then when you just put the brake lines on and do little input with the brake lines, in no time you're in a wing over, right? Because the whole body is flying. And once you get this down and you fly in rougher conditions, you actually understand and feel what the wing is doing. And you can prevent, I would say, at least 70 to 80% of collapses when you fly in and out of a thermal, right? And at the same time, you also get to feel how the wing reacts in a thermal, and you can stay in a thermal longer because you feel what the wing is doing. Because if you're not one with the wing, how should you understand the thermal? Because, based how your wing reacts, where the thermal is and where the core is, right? So that's what I bring more into it, is more the feel of the flying. And then once, here in this area, it's super easy. Once you're in a thermal, you get backed up to another 1,000 meters, and then it's just a glide to the next, right?
Right. Good advice. That's great advice. It'd be remiss of me to not ask you some X-Alps questions, because we're both big fans, obviously. Maybe looking back at your 4 campaigns, one, I got to ask you about your supporter. You did it with your wife every time. Is that right?
Yes.
You guys must have a very special relationship.
Well, I have to say very clearly, I would be only half the man without her. That's the number one part, right?
Amen.
We are a team, and she is just amazing. And the beauty about her is she has no ego, and it's all about the fun where we are and how we do things. And for us, the X-Alps, we know where we are and who we are, and sure, we have some kind of a skill level there, but competing really with guys like Kriegel on the end, give me a break, right? But so for us, it was always more like an adventure, and it's really what I liked about it is you got pulled out of your daily life, and you could do what you were dreaming of, flying across the Alps, and somebody telling you have to go here and there, and you work together. And then how focused you are in this case together, I have to say it was amazing, right? And especially doing it with my wife. That's the only time where she served me breakfast in bed. It's amazing, right? Bed.
I got to take advantage of these things.
But no, and I think that's why Ulrich and back then Hannes, they always picked us back up again and again, is because they could see how much fun we had together, and we worked together. We always had a good attitude. There was never, a bad word exchange or whatever. It was always a good attitude and fun. And I don't know, I would not do the X-Alps without her. I want to do them again and again, but she says, well, I think it's time to stop. And
it is now. I
to...
think that's what people don't appreciate about I mean, I see other teams. I think there are teams who take it really seriously that maybe aren't having quite as much fun as we are. But you know, I think people don't appreciate how much fun it is. I mean, it is, you know, there's definitely some suffering involved, and it is pretty intense, but I find the intensity also very fun. If you have a great, I was surprised how much of it is the team, you know. I mean, it's terrific flying across the Alps and being involved, and it just takes you to the craziest places, even in the Alps. You launch from the most absurd spots, and, you know, all that's really special. But for me, the thing that makes me cry at the end is that when our team goes our different ways. You know, you don't even go your separate ways. You're still together, which is phenomenal. Together, but yes. that bond and the laughter and the things you do together is really special, isn't it?
It's very special. Yeah, it's very, you know, the thing is this, I can see, I liked it the most when we only had one supporter. When we had the second support, it was actually really, Penny liked it to some extent more, because then she could hike more with me, right? But then you have another personality built into it, which is hard sometimes to really flow the same way, right? Some people, they want to push harder. Some of them, they want to push you one way or another, or some people don't, right? So, and that's what I liked with Penny, to do it together there. We were very synchronized and did it together from that point. I have to say, sure, we pushed hard, but at the same time, we never blamed anybody. And our push was always, you know, the X-Alps was more like you as the athlete do the flying and the hiking, and you have the one supporter in there as one team. And so we didn't want to have any other people flying ahead of you and have other guides guiding you in here, there. We saw the whole X-Alps always as a huge, big adventure, but only for the two of us. And that's what I like the most. Yeah,
it'd be interesting. You know, I was having dinner with Kriegel the night before the race started this time. And I was asking him, you know, because he did it with a new supporter this year with Toby, and instead of Thomas. And he was saying that in about 2013, 2011, you know, he used to do it just with Thomas. It would just be the two of them. And he was saying that it was totally fine. And Thomas wouldn't be overwhelmed, and they had a really good synergy. And, you know, but he said it's gotten so fast now that you can't do it with one anymore. It's just, there's just too much. And in some ways, I wish it would reverse. You know, there are teams. I mean, Kriegel still wins, and he doesn't have other people flying with him. You know, but there are teams that have like 4 cars now and 6 people, and, you know, like Aaron Duragati usually is in the air with 2 or 3 other pilots. You know, a couple X-Alps pilots, and Andre Prochaska is like one of the best acro pilots. And I'm not digging on Aaron. That's his approach, and it's, you know, it's a different way to do it. But in some ways, I feel like it'd be fun to rewind a little bit, because I think that must be very special when it's just the two of you.
Yes, and I have to say, you see, at the beginning, the first couple of years when I was there, it was very strict in the rules. It was only you and your supporter. And a lot of other teams, they had their pilots flying with them, and now it turns into 2, 3, 4, 5 cars, whatever you're saying there, right? And I hated that. Yeah. And some people said like, well, and when I competed, I always competed by the pure rule. I say, that's how it is. That's why I like doing it, because I like that kind of rule. Now they open it up a bit more and say you can have more supporters, you can have more like this. And I think that's a good thing, because then you make it public and say it's a whole team. Yeah. You have 2, 3 pilots who fly with you. You have these mountain guides hiking with you, you know, and not doing it all by yourself. That turns into a different X-Alps, right? Yeah. Personally, I see, knowing this, that it's actually evolving more and more into this direction, I wouldn't go back to the X-Alps. If I would really like to go back into the X-Alps when it was like it was at the very beginning. The very beginning was even 24/7. There was no night break. There was no night pass. It was just open 24 hours. And that was the best. Honestly, it's the best of the best. Right. Because this is then really you and your partner or your supporter. And then you really have to learn how to pace yourself, right? Yeah. Because right now, people who can pace themselves, if they would be back on the 24/7 race, you would see in the first 5 days they would run themselves into the ground.
Yeah, they
right?
blow up. Yeah,
And
they're still blowing up, even if the rules
that's what I
are
like.
now.
That,
yeah.
yeah, they're still blowing themselves up. And I know Thomas is an example. And I love Thomas. Thomas is an amazing guy. He's a really good friend of my kids, actually, because they always were hanging out there with us, right? As little kids.
Yeah,
and,
cool.
But Thomas is that guy I know as an example. If you make this again 24/7, he would only lay down when he's completely shut down, right?
Right.
And and I think the X-Alps is
amazing.
more. Oh yeah, but then how he even can pull it off. But still, a human being can only do it for so long, right?
Sure.
And that's what I like more. It's like when you bring it back all by yourself, the 24/7, no other supporters, nothing into it. I have to say that's what I like the best. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. There's there's a lot of appeal there for that for sure. Can you, in your 4 campaigns, this might be an impossible question, but can you relate maybe your highest moment and your lowest moment of the 4 races?
My lowest moment. Well, normally I don't really have really low moments because I really tend to forget them.
Exactly.
And I want to
type 3
fun. And I want to forget them as quick as possible. Yeah. And the thing is, I think sometimes I thought there's a reason for that. They do it every second year because you need a year to forget some stuff, right?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
I would say for me, number one is the lowest moment was my very first year, where after 8 days I had Achilles issues like inflammations, where I literally had to get out of the race on the end. And so that was for me kind of a low moment. But at the same time, it was a very high moment because I was going into the X-Alps kind of blue-eyed. So like, oh, okay, let's give this a try. And then I could actually realize after this time, wow, this can be actually fun, more fun than I thought. And I'm actually stronger than I thought, right? That was for the first year. But then another low point would be when I got my penalty, my 2-day penalty, the last race I was in, because I felt like it was one of my strongest races there, right? But one of the highest ones, I have to say, overall, is really sharing this adventure with Penny and to some extent with the kids together. Just having this kind of experience and pass this on to your family and do it with your family. This is, as you know yourself, is once you're in this X-Alps part and you do it more than once or twice, your life changes kind of around that, with your attitude, with how you approach sometimes things, because you constantly, it's the whole X-Alps stuff is a mental game, right? And so you evolve mentally way more out of it. And I say that's a very high point. From the flying perspective, one of my high points, I have to say, I think that was at the last race when after the 2-day penalty, I was racing for the last place. And I said, no, Thomas Hofbauer, he was literally just an hour behind me. And we were at the Zugspitze. And anyhow, it was such a dicey game what to do. And I was waiting on one of these ridges to take off. And I managed to take off and then literally just flew along the grass roots to the front of the Zugspitze. And the turn point was on top of the Zugspitze, right? Not down in Lermoos.
Yeah.
And so what I made is I made it around to where the big rock face is, to Erwald. And you could actually land on top there before. It's called the Gatterl, and then have about a 4-hour hike up there to the summit. But I was kind of getting too, I got some thermals and I thought I can make it and fly over the Zugspitze. And the amazing part was I made it to the top of the Zugspitze, and before where I wanted to land in, I was virtually 20 feet too low. I was in that rock face. And so I had to fly around, and I knew if I go down to Erwald, that's a 2,500 meter hike up.
Oof.
And I knew, okay, I'm done then. I'm out of this game, right? And so what I actually did is I flew then around, and I flew underneath the gondola, where the gondola goes up. And I landed just right at the beginning where the Via Varata starts, to going up to the Zugspitze, the last 400 meters. So I landed in that Via Varata.
Whoa.
And, and then just put my wing in and whoop, climbed the last 400 meters up. And I still remember the Spanish guy was standing up there, and he saw me and he looked at me and he thought he sees a ghost coming.
Holy cow.
Because I was right there, right? And then I
Wow.
said, "Oh no, let's give her. It's awesome. It's fun." And I was so pumped, right? And then he took off, and 10 minutes later, whatever, I took off. And then from there, I mean, I flew all the way down to the next turn point. Yes, I flew to the next turn point, did the turn point in the air. I flew over all these glaciers at 4,000 meters. And then I landed somewhere else again and flew off. And by the end of the day, I was in Switzerland. And I think I got 10 more ranks up. So that's one day.
Wow. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
a good day.
That was a really good day. So it was like from being last and just landing literally in the Via Varatas there or just below there. And then going off and doing this kind of flight. That was very spectacular, I have to say, yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. I had a day like that in my 2015 campaign where you just kind of go, "Whoa, what just happened?" Yeah, that's pretty exciting. Well, fantastic, Max. Thanks so much. I think that's a perfect place to end on a very high note, a big, huge flight. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and it was great talking to you. And I hope you and I get to spend some time at Cloud Base. But I know you're heading out to a great river trip in the green with your kids, so have an awesome trip. And thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And yeah, thanks a lot for having me on your show there. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. And all the best to yourself as well. Yeah, I'm sure we're going to meet one way or another.
I'm sure we will. Thanks, Max. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Shameful is the cardinal.
I hope you enjoyed that really cool talk with Max. He's heading out on a great trip, and I'm heading out to fly, so we're going to make this quick. As always, all we ask for is a buck a show. You can support us directly via PayPal on the website, cloudbasemayhem.com, or you can support us where you can kind of set it and forget it. And there's all kinds of rewards for doing so on patreon.com/cloudbasemayhem. I have promised to all of you, all the supporters, a little special episode with Kriegel Maurer. Recorded some of that at the end of our first conversation, but he and I have been trying to link up to do the second bit. Got a lot more great questions from you on Facebook. And so I promise that is coming very soon. He just got done with the World Cup in DeSantis and is spending a lot of time with his kids after the X-Alps, and we're just trying to make it happen, but we will do so. Keen to bring that to you. But for now, signing off, and we'll see you on the next show. Thanks very much. Cheers.